welcome. You are about to drift into a slower world, one built not on noise or speed, but on rhythm, silence, and centuries-old stone. Tonight, we journey to the cloisters of a medieval monastery. Here, time itself moved differently. Bells divided the hours, and voices rose in chant long before the sun appeared on the horizon. Imagine yourself stepping across the worn threshold of an abbey, the air cool, heavy with the scent of beeswax and stone. A hush falls, broken only by the faint shuffle of sandals on flagstones. This is not the bustling medieval town with its markets and chaos. This is a world apart, ordered, deliberate, and sacred. As you listen, allow yourself to slow down, to breathe in rhythm with the monks who once lived this life. Let us begin with their daily routine. A day inside the monastery walls. The day begins in darkness. Long before the rooster crows in nearby villages, the monastery stirs. You hear the bell, low, echoing through stone passageways. Its sound is not urgent, but steady, like the heartbeat of the community. You rise from a simple wooden bed, the straw mattress rough beneath you, and wrap yourself in a woolen habit that smells faintly of smoke from the last evening's fire. The floor beneath your feet is cold, the air still heavy with night. Yet around you, shadows move the shapes of brothers, each silent, each carrying a small flame to guide their way. Together, you make your way to the chapel. Inside, the chapel is dimly lit. Candles flicker, their light catching on golden threads of old tapestries. The air is thick with incense, sweet and woody, drifting upward like a slow breath. Monks line up, their voices blending into Gregorian chant, deep, steady, hypnotic. You do not need to understand the Latin words. It is the rhythm that matters. The chant rises and falls like waves upon a shore, lulling you into stillness. When the prayers end, silence returns. The monks disperse to their tasks. Some walk to the gardens, where herbs grow in neat rose sage, rosemary, mint. The morning air carries the crisp scent of damp earth. Others move to the scriptorium, a quiet room where the scratch of quills fills the silence. Imagine the sound, faint, rhythmic, like soft rain against a window. In the kitchens, the faint crackle of firewood greets the cook. Breakfast is simple, perhaps bread baked days ago, dipped into a thin broth. It is not a meal of indulgence, but of sustenance, taken in silence as the rule demands. Only the scrape of wooden spoons and the rustle of cloth break the stillness. As the sun slowly rises beyond thick monastery walls, work begins again. In the fields, hands turn soil. In the workshops, wood is carved, leather stitched, candles dipped in beeswax. Every task, however humble, is seen as prayer. The rhythm of their days is steady and unchanging. By mid-morning, the bell sounds again. Another prayer, another moment to realign thought and breath. Time in the monastery is not measured by the hourglass, but by this endless cycle of bell, prayer, and labor. As you move through this world in your mind, notice how the repetition comforts you. Each day is almost the same, and in its sameness, there is peace. Now that you have walked through a day in the monastery, let us step back in time to the figure whose vision shaped much of this life, Saint Benedict. He was not a ruler, not a warrior, not a king, and yet his rules outlasted empires. His vision stretched quietly across centuries, shaping the rhythm of thousands of lives. Imagine him in the hills of Italy in the early 6th century. The Roman Empire, once mighty, had fallen in the west. Roads cracked, cities shrank, armies and kings came and went. But in the valleys, life continued. Peasants worked the soil, shepherds tended their flocks, and seekers of peace wandered away from the crumbling cities to find God in silence. Benedict was one of these seekers. He was born around the year 480 in the town of Nursia. If you picture the landscape, you see rolling green hills, scattered stone dwellings, and the distant shape of mountains. The air there would have been sharp and cool in the mornings, filled with the sounds of sheep bells, the murmur of streams, and the voices of villagers carrying their daily tasks. Benedict grew up in this setting, rural, steady, but marked by a sense that the world beyond was unstable. As a young man, Benedict was sent to Rome to study. Imagine him there, a quiet youth, sensitive to the noise and distractions of the great city. Rome at this time was no longer the glorious capital it had once been. Buildings crumbled, crowds pressed through narrow streets. There was laughter, feasting, games, but also tension, conflict, and decay. For Benedict, it was too much. The rhythm of Rome did not soothe him, it unsettled him, so he left. He withdrew into solitude, choosing a cave in the hills of Subiaco. Imagine him stepping inside that cave for the first time, the walls damp with moisture, the air cool and still, the light outside fading as he went deeper. There, he lived as a hermit. No feasts, no noise, no distractions, only silence, prayer, and the simple rhythm of days measured by the rising and setting of the sun. For 3 years, he lived this way. His only contact with the outside world was a monk who lowered food to him by rope, quietly, without conversation. Picture the simple Mila small loaf of bread, perhaps a jug of water lowered into the darkness. Benedict took it with gratitude, sustaining himself with as little as possible. In time, people began to notice him. Stories spread of the quiet man in the cave, devoted to prayer, untouched by the chaos of the world. Gradually, others came to him. They asked him for guidance, for leadership, and Benedict, though reluctant, agreed. He began to organize communities of monks, bringing them together, not as solitary hermits, but as brothers who shared their lives. This was the beginning of what would later be known as the Rule of Saint Benedict. It was not a grand manifesto. It was not a proclamation for kings or warriors. Instead, it was a gentle but firm framework for daily life. Simple rules: wake at this time, pray at this time, eat modestly, work with your hands, keep silence when needed, and treat all guests with respect. The rhythm was deliberate. The rule did not emphasize great feats of suffering or extremes of fasting, though some monks in earlier centuries had chosen that path. Benedict's way was different. It was steady, balanced, and enduring. He called his monastery a school for the Lord's service, a place where ordinary people could live extraordinary devotion through ordinary tasks. Think of how this shaped lives for centuries afterward. A boy arriving at a monastery in the 10th century, or a weary pilgrim stopping for shelter, would encounter not just walls and cloisters, but a living rhythm born from Benedict's quiet vision. The rule guided how they prayed, how they worked, and how they shared their meals. One of Benedict's most famous phrases in the rule is ora, et laboropra, and work. The two were never separate. Digging in the garden was as much prayer as chanting in the chapel. Writing a manuscript was as much prayer as fasting in silence. Every task, every hour had meaning. Now imagine, slowly, the passing of a single day in the monastery through Benedict's eyes. You can see the monks gather before dawn, their voices steady in chant. You can watch them disperse to their tasks, stilling soil, copying texts, tending bees, baking bread. The sun moves slowly across the sky, bells marking the hours. Evening comes, the air cooling, shadows stretching long across cloisters, until once again night returns. This cycle, so steady, so unchanging, becomes the life of the monastery itself. For Benedict, this life was both discipline and peace. Discipline in rising at set hours, keeping silence, showing obedience. Peace in the stillness, the predictability, the sense that all of life was ordered toward something greater than the self. As centuries passed, Benedict himself became a figure of memory, a saint whose example endured long after his earthly life ended. Yet his presence was still felt not through statues or grand monuments, but in the daily hum of monastery life, in the bell that rang at dawn, in the bread broken at table, in the chant rising softly into vaulted ceilings. And as you rest now, listening, you can imagine yourself there, not in the noise of history's battles or the courts of kings, but in the quiet footsteps of men and women who sought peace. Their rhythm can be your rhythm, their silence, your silence, your silence. Each breath, slow and steady, like the toll of a distant bell, marking time, marking rest. As we move deeper into the monastery, let us step quietly into another room, the scriptorium. It is a place where silence is more than silence, it is devotion. You enter slowly. The air feels different here, heavier, carrying the faint, dry scent of parchment and ink. The walls are thick, keeping the space cool even in summer. A narrow window lets in just enough light to fall across wooden desks where quills and knives, pigments and brushes wait patiently. Imagine yourself sitting at one of these desks. Before you is a sheet of vellum, smooth but faintly textured beneath your fingertips. It is not paper, but animal skin, prepared with care, scraped, stretched, polished, until it is ready to hold words that may last for centuries. His hood casts a shadow across his face, leaving only the careful movements of his hand visible. With a quill cut from a goose feather, he dips into ink thick, dark, permanent. Each letter is shaped with patience, deliberate and slow. The rhythm of the strokes is steady, almost meditative. Scratch, pause, dip, scratch, pause, dip. Hours pass like this. The room is nearly silent, except for the soft scrape of quills and the occasional rustle of parchment being turned. You notice how the silence feels alive, filled with concentration. For the monks, this work is not mere copying. It is an act of prayer. Each word they write, each careful stroke, is given as devotion. Imagine the sudden shift from black ink to brilliant red, blue, and gold. These are the illuminations. Vines twist along the edge of a page, bursting into flowers. Small animals peek from between letters, a rabbit, a bird, even a fantastical creature with wings or a dragon's head. The sacred words become surrounded by a world of imagination. The pigments come from distant places. Blue from lapis lazuli, mined in faraway Afghanistan. Red from ground cinnabar, heavy and vibrant. Green from verdigris, made by weathering copper plates. Gold leaf, so thin it trembles in the slightest breath, is pressed onto the page until it gleams, catching the flicker of candlelight. He grinds minerals on a small stone slab, the sound faint but sharp. He mixes them with egg white or gum arabic, forming paints that will endure. Each color is costly, each stroke deliberate. The blue of lapis was more precious than gold, and yet here, in the quiet of the monastery, it is used to honor words meant to outlast kings. Now picture the library itself, where these manuscripts are stored. The shelves are not filled with thousands of books, as in a modern library. Instead, perhaps only a few dozen. Each book is heavy, bound in leather, sometimes clasped with metal. They rest on wooden shelves or chained to desks, for they are too valuable to be lost. The air here is cool, still, and faintly musty with the scent of old parchment and wood. As you imagine yourself walking through the rows, you can hear the soft creak of wood underfoot, the faint hum of silence pressing around you. Every book holds not just words, but the countless hours of human hands, eyes, and hearts devoted to preserving them. Sometimes these manuscripts contain mysteries, a strange symbol in the margin, a note, a doodle, whimsical and unexpected, breaking the solemnity of the page. Imagine finding a tiny sketch of a cat pawing at the text, drawn centuries ago by a monk who perhaps raised his eyes from work, smiled, and then quietly returned to his duty. Others hold knowledge from distant worlds, fragments of Aristotle, works of medicine, old Roman history's texts that would have vanished had not these monks. Much of what we know of the ancient world comes to us through their steady hands. Pause and consider. In the outside world of the Middle Ages, wars raged, empires rose and fell, villages were burned, rebuilt, and abandoned. Lives ended, but words remained. You can imagine yourself as one of these monks, day after day, returning to your desk, your quill, your vellum. The seasons change outside the thick stone walls. In winter, your fingers grow stiff with cold, and you breathe upon them before writing again. In summer, the light through the window shifts to a warmer gold, and you pause to rest your eyes, listening to the bees outside in the garden. But always, you return to the text. Always, the words continue. Now, picture the finished book resting heavy in your hands, the leather binding smooth beneath your fingers, the pages thick, the illuminations gleaming faintly, even in dim light. You close it gently, hearing the soft thud as parchment meets parchment, and place it upon the shelf. There it will remain for centuries, waiting, patient for another pair of hands to open it once more. As you linger here in your imagination, in the hush of the monastery library, notice the comfort of this rhythm, copying, illuminating, preserving. The work is never rushed, never frantic. It is measured, patient, unchanging, just as the chant and the bell order the day. So too does the turning of pages order the life of the monastery. And so, in the stillness of this place, you rest too. The rhythm of the quill, the turning of pages, the shimmer of gold, in candlelight, all of it blending into a gentle lullaby of ink, parchment, and silence. Step now, in your imagination, beyond the monastery walls. You leave behind the cloisters, the hushed rhythm of bells and chants. The stone gate closes softly behind you, and suddenly the world outside feels different, louder, brighter, more restless. Here, on the roads beyond, carriages roll, horses clatter, and nobles in fine garments make their way across the countryside. Imagine the fabric of their robes, silk from the east, velvet dyed in deep crimson fur collars that soften against the skin. Each garment speaks of wealth, of trade routes stretching far beyond these valleys, of coins exchanged, of merchants traveling long distances. Now, let us imagine one of these nobles approaching a monastery, perhaps a duke or a wealthy lady of the court. Their arrival is not quiet. Servants precede them, horses stamp their hooves, carriages creak beneath the weight of trunks filled with belongings. You can hear the leather reins snap gently, the murmurs of voices, the faint jingling of harnesses. When they enter the monastery, a strange stillness falls, for within these walls all are equal monk, noble, or peasant. Guests are welcomed with respect, and even kings must sit at the same wooden tables, eating the same coarse bread, drinking the same thin wine, and yet the difference is visible. Imagine the noble used to gilded halls and silver platters, now tasting a meal of lentils, bread, and water. The wooden spoon feels heavy in their hand, the flavors plain compared to their feasts. For them it is strange, but for the monks it is life itself, steady, grounding, and sufficient. At night, the noble might sleep in a chamber set aside for guests. The bed is simple, the walls bare, the silence presses in. For someone accustomed to music, chatter, and entertainment, this silence is startling, but slowly it softens, slowly it soothes. Now contrast this again with the life they leave behind. Imagine the castle halls, long tables filled with roasted meats, golden goblets brimming with wine, tapestries rich with color. Fires blaze in great hearths, laughter echoes through the night, and courtiers whisper and scheme in corners. In the monastery, by contrast, the hall is dim, the food is plain, conversation is rare. Yet in this plainness there is a different richness of stillness, of rhythm, of the sense that life is not fleeting but anchored. As you drift through this contrast, notice how time itself feels different. In the noble's world, time is a rush of events, banquets, hunts, councils, marriages, wars. In the monastery, time is the tolling of the bell, the changing of seasons in the garden, the endless repetition of chant. The monk's time is inward, filled with silence, and yet both worlds touched each other. Nobles gave land and gifts to monasteries, seeking prayers in return. Monks prayed for their benefactors, preserving their names in books of remembrance. Wealth supported silence, and silence gave meaning to wealth. The two worlds, though so different, were bound together. Picture now a noble and a monk walking side by side in the cloister garden. The noble's garments shimmer with color, while the monk's woolen robe is plain, coarse, almost shapeless. The noble speaks of politics, of wars, of alliances. The monk listens, nods, but then points to the herbs at his feet, sage, rosemary, time reminders of another kind of life, where healing and prayer matter more than power. For a moment, the two worlds meet. For a moment, they walk together in the quiet rhythm of the cloister, and then, inevitably, they part again. The noble returns to the noise of courts and castles. The monk returns to silence, to prayer, to repetition. As you rest now, consider this contrast not as conflict, but as balance. The noise of one world, the silence of another. The wealth of one, the simplicity of another. Both passing through history, both leaving traces that linger still. And so, as the night deepens, you remain with the monks, the cloister arches above you, the stone walls cool against the air. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. Its sound is steady, low, and calming. You breathe in rhythm with it. You close your eyes. The noble's feasts fade away. The noise of the world beyond dissolves. What remains is stillness. What remains is silence. and in that silence you rest. As night slowly deepens, the monastery's stone walls sink into silence. The wind drifts through the ancient corridors like a soft, murmuring echo. Doors close gently, candles burn low. All that remains is the faint resonance of prayers long whispered within these stones. The footsteps that once echoed now exist only in memory, in the quiet corners of your imagination. Outside, mist slowly wraps the monastery in a pale embrace. The sky above is sprinkled with faint stars, each one shimmering like a fragment of a story long forgotten. Time seems to lose its meaning within these walls. Past, present, and future blend softly together. Even after you leave, the monastery remains in its quiet solitude, holding its secrets in stillness. And now, close your eyes slowly. Let the gentle echoes of stone, the flickering dance of candlelight, and the whispering mists lull you into rest. Perhaps, as you drift into sleep, you might wonder, what secrets do these walls still hold, quietly waiting to be discovered long after the world has moved on?